Just sip a beer, loosen my throat, wet my whistle. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. When I did part one of my real experiences with the paranormal, my real ghost stories, I did not expect that I would be doing a part two this quickly. But everybody really enjoyed part one, and I said in that video that if I got to 20 likes, I would do a part two and I would put it live this coming weekend. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sticking to my plan. I got 20 likes. I think at the time of recording this, the video has 22 likes. So thank you everybody who liked the video, and all the lovely comments that I got sent as well. A lot of people said they really enjoyed it, they found it really interesting, and I got a couple of other ghost stories from other people who'd watched the video which were really interesting as well. So maybe there's the potential to do another video in the future where I read out some of your ghost stories and kind of we can all listen to them. Let me know if that's something you want me to do, or if you're well and truly over the ghost, paranormal, Halloween content, don't worry. It's literally Halloween on Monday and it'll all be done. So either way, let me know. So this story I probably should have included in the last video, because going kind of chronologically through my kind of paranormal experiences, this actually happened to me in university, so before I moved to Lamport. So in my second year of uni, I lived in a house, which is quite common in the UK. You mostly spend the first year in halls of residence, and then in the second year you go into a shared house with friends, and that's what we did. And we lived on this really long row of Victorian houses, terrace houses we call them in the UK. I'm not sure what they'd be called in America, because I don't think I've ever really seen anything like this in America. But we lived in there. It was a 3-bedroom, but there were 4 of us sharing. So what they'd done, the people who owned the house, is they'd turned one of the front living rooms right at the front of the house into a 4th bedroom. So we drew straws for who wanted the different rooms, and I drew the short straw for getting the downstairs bedroom. Great. Which I didn't particularly want to live downstairs, but do you know what? I was like, it's fine, I'll just get on with it. It was quite a nice big size room. It had a really old ornate fireplace in it. There was plenty of room for my spare bed, and then I had like this really old big wardrobe and a desk down one side. It, like I say, it must have been a couple of weeks or a couple of months or something of moving in. I started hearing really weird noises in the middle of the night. I started hearing shuffling sounds, as if somebody was in the room with me and was moving around, you know, kind of either that noise that clothes make as you step up from a chair or get back down again, or the sound of like feet shuffling along the floor. It was floorboards on the floor, there was no carpet down. So I didn't know whether it was somebody outside perhaps who was like walking past, but there was a noise that would happen, which was, there was like a clunking noise that I would hear quite regularly. And I figured out within the first couple of weeks that actually what was happening was, it was people walking on a loose flagstone outside the house. The flagstone would clunk and then I'd hear it in the bedroom. So there were some noises that came from outside, but these noises of people like somebody moving around or shuffling, it felt like it was in the room with me, and it felt like it was like over by the window. And yeah, the things like that you can kind of shrug off. You can say, oh, it's maybe somebody outside, or maybe it's one of the girls upstairs in the upstairs bedroom that's moving around that I can hear. And I kind of shrugged that off. And then a few weeks later, I heard the sound of somebody slow clapping, like a really... And that really scared me. That really creeped me out, because I knew that was inside that room. There was absolutely no way that was anywhere else outside. It was like, it used to happen at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And yes, I'm in a student house on a road that had some students on it, but it was actually quite a residential road as well. It had families. We had families actually on either side of our house. So we didn't have students living next door to us. And it wasn't like there were no voices before or after. It wasn't like I'd heard a group of people messing around on the road and then one of them started slow clapping. This would happen in the dead of night, in the perfect silence. I would suddenly hear a clapping, and that really scared me. And then I used to also heard the sound of someone like clearing their throat, and it always made me feel like it was, especially the throat clearing, made me feel like it was a bit like an old man. It was like really deep and low. And yeah, I used to hear that, and that really scared me. And by this point, we were probably like halfway through the year, I was sleeping with a nightlight. So I'd got myself this tiny little, it was a pink flowery nightlight thing, and I can't even remember where I got it from. It might have just been from the supermarket or from IKEA or something. And it was this cheap little lamp, and I started sleeping with it on at night because I was so scared that when I was in the dark I couldn't see the corners of the room because it was quite a big room, and I was just really scared that if I couldn't see it, then it could see me. And so yeah, it basically made me afraid of the dark, and I slept with a nightlight every night until I met Tom. And actually, for the first few months of me and Tom being together, I would sometimes sleep with a nightlight. I got a nightlight app on my phone that I would use to kind of create some ambient light because I was scared of the dark for a really long time after me and Tom started seeing each other. Tom's my husband, by the way, if this is the first video of mine that you're watching. So that was all scary enough as it was. And then there was one instance where it was the middle of the night again, and I was in bed asleep, and I heard somebody knock on my door, but like knock on my door in a real, like, aggressive, it was like really, really aggressive banging noise. And I was absolutely terrified. I was so scared that I didn't even dare look and see what it was. Yeah, so I was absolutely terrified. I didn't get out of bed. I couldn't even like say hello or anything like that. And my bed was like, the foot of the bed was at the door. The door was kind of at the foot of the bed. And I was just absolutely frozen in fear. I think that's one of the things that people don't tell you about, is like you see in ghost stories that people are scared and they scream or they run or they do this and the other. Actually, you freeze, you like become completely frozen in place, and you don't want to breathe, you don't want to make a noise in case whatever it is finds you. And I remember just being like that, and I was absolutely terrified. My heart was beating, and eventually I must have fallen asleep, because the next morning I got up and I spoke to my 3 housemates, and I said, because the thing was, somebody had knocked, and it was an aggressive knock as if they desperately needed my attention, but then there wasn't another knock. So if it had been one of my housemates, they always knocked and then said, can I come in? Or they would knock once, and if they were knocking in the middle of the night, they're knocking for a reason. And they didn't do it again. They didn't knock again to come in again. So there was no indication that there was one of my housemates on the other side of that door trying to get in. And so I spoke to them the next morning and I said, did any of you knock on my bedroom door last night? And they all said, no, why would we do that? And in the end, I didn't get shitty with them, but I got a little bit frustrated with them, and I said, look guys, it's really not funny. Like, what's going on in my room I'm finding it really scary. And if any of you have knocked to kind of like try and be funny or jokey, I really don't appreciate it. And they all swore hands down that they hadn't done it. They hadn't knocked on the bedroom door. So I don't really know what that was or who that was, but all I can imagine is that it was an old guy that had lived in that house many, many, many years ago, and now was a bit pissed off that there were a load of students in his house making noise. So yeah, that was my bedroom in second year, and I hated it. And in third year, I actually moved in with some other friends, and I had a really lovely room then. It was upstairs, and yeah, I never had any other paranormal experiences at university, but that stays with me a lot, because like I say, it actually made me afraid of the dark for many, many years. So the next one I wanted to mention was again at a English heritage property. So when I finished at Lamport, finished my master's degree, I actually moved back up north because I'd met Tom by this point and we were dating, or going out, whatever you call it. And so I wanted to move back home so I could be closer to him. And I transferred from Kirby Hall in Northamptonshire up to Peveril Castle in Castleton in Derbyshire. And it was a Norman castle that was right up on the top of a hill. In fact, there was a ravine, and part of the castle was built on one side of the ravine and part was built on the other, and they had a bridge that went across. The bit on the other side of the cavern and the bridge has since been demolished or has just not survived. But the keep itself, the Norman kind of keep, and the bailey that was around it where all the other buildings were, is still there. And so it's like a partial ruin that English Heritage own and open to the public. And I used to be, again, it was quite a small team. At the end of the day, while one person was kind of cashing up and sorting out the shop, another person would go up and clear the site, make sure there was nobody left. Usually it's very, very rare that there was anybody left. You might meet someone coming down as you were going back up, but very, very rarely was anybody still in the property that you had to kind of shoo out. And like I say, it was a partial ruin, so the only bit of the buildings that you had to go inside of was the actual keep itself. And it had a spiral staircase. You went up the top and then you went in the side of the keep and kind of looked down into the ruined bit inside. And you had to go down the little kind of tiny medieval spiral staircases in the building to make sure there was nobody downstairs and kind of clear it as you came up and then locked it. And I hated going into the keep. It was the one place where I was convinced somebody was walking behind me the whole time I was in there, almost like ushering me out as if they didn't want me in there. And I used to hate it. In fact, sometimes I used to go into the top, and this is really bad, but I used to go into the top and I used to go, hello? And if there was no members of the public, like I would say, I'm closing the building now, if there's any members of the public in the building. And if nobody said anything, I would come out and lock the door. Like sometimes I wouldn't even go downstairs. I know that's really bad, because if somebody had got locked in there, I would be in quite a lot of trouble. But I was so scared to go down into the bottom bit of the keep. I really didn't want to do it. So, and the moment that you came out of the keep and into the Bailey area, I felt so comfortable there. I could have stayed there all night, just kind of pottering around, brushing leaves up, making sure there were no slippery surfaces, that kind of thing. The Bailey itself felt lovely, but there was something about that keep that didn't want people inside it at all. So I don't know of any ghost experiences that have actually happened at the castle, but that was definitely something that just made me feel really not welcome when I was there. So the next experience that I had was, again, I didn't really see or experience anything per se, but I got a really strange feeling and I had to capture something on camera, so I just wanted to share it with you. So this was just after I finished university, before I moved to Lamport. I went on a mini grand tour, which seems so indulgent now and so pretentious, but basically I couldn't afford to go to Italy or Europe where actual genteel gentlemen went on a grand tour. But what I wanted to do, because I was doing a master's in country house studies, I wanted to go to country houses around Yorkshire and kind of Lancashire and York area, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about country houses before I started my master's degree in the September. But it was really lovely, and I got to see so many different country houses. And one that I went to was Smithville Hall, which is, I think it's like Manchester, it's in the suburbs of kind of Manchester, Cheshire. And I just found it really fascinating. It's a really beautiful, long, half-timbered building. And I turned up on the day, it was almost closing, but they let me in. And so it was deadly quiet. There was nobody else in there, no other member of the public looking round. And it was great because I had the whole house to myself, basically. And I was pottering around having a look at things, you know, just learning about the history. And I went into the chapel area, which they have a chapel, and there'd been a chapel on the site since Saxon times. It's a really, really old piece of consecrated land. And there had been some stories of a grey lady being seen sat in like a pew and a priest who'd been seen knelt at the altar. Fortunately, I didn't see any of that. I was hoping to, but I didn't. But I did have 2 cameras with me for this trip that I'd taken with me. One was a disposable camera that my stepdad Alan gave to me, and the other was a digital camera, but it was like a really, really old, I think it was like a Fujifilm pink digital camera. It was back in the day when everybody used to have a digital camera at university, and you'd go out and you'd take photos, like 1,000 photos in a single night, and then you'd get home and you'd go through them all, upload them to your computer and put them all on Facebook. It was those days. And so I had this pink digital camera that I'd had at uni, and I got into the chapel and my digital camera just drained of all battery, and I was like, great. And it was on something like 70% when I went into the chapel. So I took out my disposable camera instead. Not disposable, a film. It was a film camera, you know, one that you actually used to put the film in. And I took a photo in the chapel, and I took the photo and the camera broke. Like it kind of clicked, but then the shutter didn't reopen. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I had a look and I tried to fix it while I was there in the church. Could not work out what had happened. I didn't know if it had got to the end of the film and then the film had jammed, or what had happened. I thought it might be the batteries. I tried new batteries, that didn't work. So I was basically in this house with no camera to take anything. But later on I found out that that was quite a common thing, that batteries would get drained in the chapel. And then a little bit later I walked out of the chapel into another area of the house, and all of a sudden my digital camera turned back on again, and it had 70% again. So I didn't go back into the chapel. I should have done. I should have gone back into the chapel and tried to take some more photos. But by that point, they were kind of closing, so I had to kind of finish up what I was doing. So I remember turning around with my camera and taking one last kind of photo of the Great Hall going into the corridor that led to the chapel. And I took this photo, never thought anything more, got back to the B&B or wherever I was staying that night and had a look at these photos. And in the doorway, there was a figure in black, and it looked like it was very, very blurry, really blurry, hard to make out, but it looked like a figure in a black cloak that was kind of like sweeping to the side, and it almost looked like they had like a staff in their hand or something. And I was like, that's weird, that's really creepy. I didn't really think it was a ghost because at the time it was in a doorway, and behind that doorway was another room and another room and another room. So I'd kind of thought, well, maybe it was something in those rooms that was kind of making it look like there was somebody stood in the doorway. But I'd love to see that photo now. Unfortunately, I have looked everywhere for that photograph and I can't find it. Yeah, so I watched the episode of Most Haunted again, and they were talking about the character of George Marsh, which was a man who had lived at Smithville Hall during the time of Bloody Mary's reign. So that's Queen Mary I. And he was a Protestant vicar, and she obviously wanted the whole country to be Catholic. And so he was tried for treason and he was burnt at the stake. And on this episode of Most Haunted, they showed 2 pictures of him. And in both of those pictures, he was in a long black cloak. And literally, again, the hairs went up on the back of my neck as I watched this episode, and I was like, okay, maybe I caught a picture of George Marsh then. That's all I can think, really. And so maybe me being in the chapel, my battery dying and my other camera breaking, all of that energy allowed him to then appear in the doorway when I went back and took that last shot before I left. Who knows? Maybe I should go back to Smithville's and try and capture his face again. We'll see. Right, now I know you're all desperate to see this ghost photograph that I've been talking about, and I feel like I've amped it up now and hyped it up to the point that you're all going to be like, what? When I show it to you. It's not like somebody dressed in a white cloak, really obvious. I'd like to show you the original version, and then I'll show you a version where I have kind of outlined the figure, and see if on the original one you saw the figure before I outlined it, because I do feel like once you outline something it makes it really obvious that there's something there. So basically this photograph was taken at somewhere called Rufford Old Hall, which again is in the Cheshire area, and I visited as part of this grand tour of country houses. But it's a beautiful, again, half timbered country house. It's actually owned by the National Trust, and again, Most Haunted have done an episode there, but I couldn't find it to have a look at. But I know they have, because I actually got in touch with them about this photo and said, look, I've got this photograph that I took when I was at Rufford Old Hall, do you want to see it? Anyway, they never got back in touch with me. So yeah, I'd been looking around the house, had a really great time in the house, and I thought I'll go for a wander in the gardens before I set off wherever I was going next. And so I came out and went down in the house through the formal gardens, and they had this bit where it kind of was a walk along the side of a stream. It was really beautiful. It had like loads of trees, and then there was like kind of this grassy area with some like bushes and things. And I remember there were some ducks just kind of pottering about on the grass, as ducks do. And at the time, my goddaughter and cousin Imogen would have been, yeah, she'd have been about 5. Sorry, Imogen, I should know exactly how old you were, but she'd have been about 5, and I saw the ducks and I thought, I'll take a picture of the ducks for Imogen and I'll show it her when we get back. And so I took this picture of these ducks, again, didn't think anything of it, carried on looking around the gardens, and then when I got back to the B&B that I was staying at, I keep wanting to say Airbnb. Airbnb was not a thing back in 2009. When I got back to my B&B, I had a look at the photographs and I was flicking through again, and I saw this picture, and it just I didn't even see the ducks. When I looked at this photo, I was like, oh my God, there's a man kneeling in the grass. So I'll put this picture up at the side of me now. So in this picture, and I'm not going to say where at the moment, this is just the original picture, I can see a man that looks maybe a little bit like a monk with his arms folded, kneeling in the grass, and it's profile. So he's not looking into the camera. It's almost like the camera is taking the side-on photo. And I can see him, arms folded, kneeling, looking down, as if praying. And for me, I can't look at that photo and not see it. But there is something called Paradolia, which is basically our eyes and our minds like to find patterns in randomness. So there is an argument here that this photo is an example of Paradolia, but for me, I think the lines around this figure are thicker than any of the lines in the rest of the photograph. And the fact that you can see like eyes, you can see the outline of his nose, I think. And then on the Most Haunted episode, so this was taken in like 2009, I think Most Haunted came in like 2015, 2016, something like that. And they were talking about the ghost of a monk that had been seen around Rufford Old Hall. And I was I went cold because I didn't know that. I didn't know any stories of ghost stories or hauntings at Rufford Old Hall. I picked it because it was a really beautiful country house and it was kind of on the route that I wanted to go and see. Like I say, Most Haunted hadn't investigated there yet, but when they did, I was like, they're talking about a monk seen in the gardens. Well, I've got a photo of him, and that's why I got in touch with them. But like I said, they never got back to me, unfortunately. But yes, what do you think? Can you see a monk in this photo? Now, what I'm going to do now is I'll show you the photo with the red outline around it, which is where I see this figure. What do you think? Can you see the figure now better? Were you looking somewhere else at the photo, or have I just confirmed what you were looking at all along, which is what I was looking at all along? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd really love to have a chat about this because I find this kind of thing really interesting. What do you think of this photograph? Do you think it is legit? I mean, I haven't tampered with it, so I absolutely promise you I haven't done anything with this photo other than put the outline around it. But yeah, let me know what you think. Do you think it's a photo of a ghost? So I'm going to finish this video with a couple of experiences that I've had on ghost hunts. Now, around 2010, me and my cousin Gaynor went on our very first ghost hunt together, and she's really interested in the paranormal, loves ghosts. And in 2010, we went to Alton Towers. Now, if you're not from around the north, you might not know what Alton Towers is. I would have thought you would, but I'll explain it anyway, especially for those people who don't live in the UK. It's a theme park. But the theme park has been built around the towers, which are a ruined stately home. It's a huge Gothic style country house, which actually does have a ride inside of it now. But there's all the rides of the theme park are around Alton Towers itself. Yeah, the actual theme park is closed around yet, and then you basically go into this really old building that's in the middle of this theme park. It's really creepy. So there were quite a few things that happened while I was there, but the one main thing that I remember is that we were right up on the top of the top floor of the building, and we were doing a walk around, which is where they kind of give you some of the history of the building. They show you the different rooms that you're going to be ghost hunting throughout the night, and they tell you a little bit about like the ghosts and the history. So we're right up on the top floor and we're having a look around, as they do at the beginning of these ghost hunts. You kind of go around and you have a look at all the different places that you're going to be investigating, and they tell you some of the stories of the ghosts and the history of the place. And they talked about, because we were up in the top floor, it was like the old nurseries, and they were saying that there was apparently the ghost of a little boy there, and that these two guys in the 80s had broken in and had heard the spirit of the little boy and his train set, which made kind of like a, I suppose if you're into trains, like the sound of a train is like, you know, an electric train sound, not like a steam train sound that you would hear, which would be like, you know, like not that kind of sound. It's very distinctive. If you've ever heard an electric train set go, which I might even be able to find a little clip just to put into this video, it was like a sound that they heard, these two kids. And anyway, we heard this story, moved on, and as we were leaving the room, me, Gaynor, and a couple of other people, probably about 3 or 4 other people, were at the back of the group, just leaving this room. And as we were leaving, we all heard the of the train kit. It lasted about 3 or 4 seconds long, the sound of the train, and we all instantly froze and all said at the same time, "Did you hear that?" So we'd all heard it, it was undeniable, and we all said, "What did it sound like?" And the other person was like, "It sounded like a train set, it sounded like a train set." And so we all kind of went, right. time for us to go. And we kind of like made a swift exit because there was nobody else in the room. It was quite creepy. And so, yeah, that was a really, really great moment because it was like, there were so many of us that heard it. You can't deny it at that point. So yeah, that was interesting. Somebody else at that event took a photograph, which they shared it on the Facebook group, and I've tried to find this photograph. I've even put like a post into the Most Haunted official Facebook group, trying to see if anybody did go to that event and remembers. But basically it was a photograph of what looked like a woman, quite a big woman, a buxom woman, in a long black dress with like a white ruffle kind of at the neck, like, you know, the like little square ruff things that they used to wear. And he said, you know, he says there was nobody there when I took the photograph. There was a lot of discussion about it afterwards because, again, he didn't know what he'd taken until he got home. So there's a lot of discussion in the Facebook group around it. But like I say, I can't find it, so I can't show you the photograph. It was really interesting. And then again, I went home and I watched the Most Haunted Alton Towers episode, and David Wells, the medium, was talking about the fact that there was a governess who was there, who was dressed in black with a white ruff at her neck. And I was like, wow, that wasn't even my photograph, that wasn't even my experience, but the fact that somebody else had caught that on camera at the event that we were at was really, really interesting. So the last story I'm going to leave you with, and I'm sorry this has probably been a little bit of a longer video than my part one, just because I've had quite a bit to go through, but this is the last story, I promise you. This was at Leeds Central Library, which is the main library building in the centre of Leeds, as you would guess by the name, and it's actually part of Leeds City Council. And when I worked at Temple Newsham House in Leeds, that was owned by Leeds City Council, so we were all like one big group. And they sent around an email one day saying that they were thinking about starting paranormal investigations at the library. And so they brought in this external company to do like a test event, and they wanted to do it with the staff first rather than bringing in the members of the public. And so they asked if any staff members wanted to come along, and I jumped at the chance. I was like, yes, absolutely. You were allowed to bring a +1, so of course I brought my cousin Gaynor with me, and together we went to Leeds Central Library, and it was the first time it had ever been investigated by paranormal investigators before. So that was really interesting, and I genuinely think that's what that made it more active. I think I'd love to go into some places for the first time and investigate for the first time, because I think they must be so active. I don't think a paranormal investigation has ever taken place at Kirby Hall, and I think that would be an amazing one to do for the first time, because it's almost like these spirits have been here for many, many, many years and never had anyone acknowledge their presence. And then some people go in on a night and they actually talk to them, and that's when you seem to get more activity. So there were quite a few different things that went on, some personal things which I don't particularly want to go into, as in messages from people that personal people that have passed away. But there was one moment when we were in a really old library building. I can't remember which library room. I can't remember which room it was, but it had like books above the doorway. It was really, really interesting. And we were in this kind of little corner, all stood in a circle in the dark. And I used to wear these really lightweight trousers for work, and I'd been at work that day, so I was wearing them. And they were really, really thin, almost like not a chiffon, but like a silky material, like a silky elastic material, and they were quite baggy. And I was stood and I was holding Gaynor's hand, and I was holding the hand of the organiser on my left, because you kind of do that, you stand in a circle and hold hands. And I said to them, I said, somebody's pulling on my trouser leg. I said, I can feel my trouser leg moving. And so they looked behind me, put a torch on, and just one of my trouser legs was like shaking, almost as if somebody was like tugging on my trousers, trying to get my attention. Now, they say that when any activity happens from the waist down, it tends to be children, because obviously they can only reach so high to get your attention. And they could see it, they could see my trouser leg. But the funny thing was, the other trouser leg on the other side wasn't moving. So it wasn't like it was a breeze or that I was like shaking my hips to make it jiggle. I was trying to stand as completely still as I could so that I could make sure that it wasn't me that was doing it. And they both looked and they were like, oh yeah, we can see your trouser leg moving. I was like, oh my God, that's absolutely mental. And I didn't feel scared at all. It was kind of crazy that there was something potentially stood just next to me that was trying to get my attention. It was quite sweet, actually. So yeah, that was probably one of the nicer kind of experiences that I've had. yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. I'm sorry if that was a little bit too long, but hopefully if you enjoyed part 1 and you've been waiting for part 2, you've enjoyed this video as well. Thank you very much for watching. You won't have very long to wait for a new video because there is one coming on Halloween night, which is about very famous ghost photographs, mainly in kind of historic or heritage buildings, and I'm going to tell you whether I think they're real or fake. So yeah, stay around for that. If you're not already subscribed, please do consider subscribing. I am so close to getting 400 subscribers and I would love to hit that target by the end of the month. So if you're not already subscribed, please do. It helps me move ever closer to being able to monetize my channel, which means that I can actually start earning some money back for the videos I create, which would be lovely because it would mean I could create even more for you. So yeah. So yes, I will be back very shortly. Thank you very much for watching my spooky video and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.